Hey, you're listening to Fat and Greasy Citizens, a podcast about Shakespeare. I'm Fat.
And I'm Greasy. Every week we do a deep dive into every act of every Shakespeare play ever written, mostly while drinking.
More specifically, I'm Chuck. I'm a former English major and now a digital editor who cares a lot about Shakespeare.
And I'm Gabe. Let's do it!
Hail and well met, mine myrmidons. It is us, Queen Lizzie Onesies. Welcome you to Fat and Greasy Citizens. In this episode, the first act of Merchant of Venice, in which we meet local Italian asshole Antonio, who agrees to give his pal Bassanio a loan. But because he doesn't have the money, he knows a merchant in Venice, as the title, called Shylock, who may be able to help them out. Once there, Antonio proceeds to be exactly what one needs to be to secure a loan from a Jewish moneylender, anti-Semitic. But Shylock says he won't charge interest this time, but will, somewhat jokingly, ask for a pound of flesh if the debt isn't paid. Pay attention to that, it'll come back later. Meanwhile, Bassanio's true love, Portia, is sifting through a bunch of potential suitors, all of whom fail her deceased father's fun casket game. Oh, and Portia says some pretty racist things in this part too. It's fun! Some people think this is a comedy, and those people most likely make Thanksgiving dinners with the family really uncomfortable. Enjoy.
All right, Merchant of Venice, Act 1. I'm excited to be back in the thick of, will this be too racist to put on? And I feel like on that, it's got the audience like right on the edge of their seats. It could veer off into irredeemable at any moment, but I feel like in the first act, I feel like the cart is still on the roller coaster track. Like the kids aren't dead yet. Like everyone could be dead at any second, but it's not over yet.
It seems like, and I think I've mentioned this before, that Shakespeare had plays that were similar to other plays of the time, but had less provocative titles. You know, like we talked about "'Tis Pity She's a Whore" versus, you know, something like "Taming the Shrew" or something like that. But there was a play around this time. It might have been by
Marlowe.
It might have been by Marlowe, Jew of Malta, or it could have been by what's his name. There's another big playwright at the time. I can't remember his name, but there was a play called Jew of Malta, which is almost the same play. It's like the same. It's the same story. You know, there's an evil Jew. This one I think it gives the Jewish character a lot more three-dimensionality. But not much, you know. it's still
dimensions. I love that Malta is. I don't know who owns Malta right now, but it's off the coast of Sicily. So it is the laziest type. Like it's like you put it through Google Translate. Like how can I steal this? And like it's like when God, I always just make comic book references, but it's like when Stan Lee came up with Captain Marvel just to make sure that he could steal from Shazam. Just be like, nope, we're doing that. So. The Jew of Malta is big. What if we did the Merchant of Venice? But everyone knows it's gonna revolve around a Jewish character.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that even if you can get around the characterization of Shylock, the premise is kind of racist. You know, like it's about a bargain made with a Jewish character. You know what I mean? It's about business.
Right. Whereas
you know,
lots of the other stuff. So I feel like the sexist stuff that we've seen so far, it's either baked in and you have to find a way around it or you can't. The racist stuff is mostly stuff so far that you could cut out if you wanted to. You don't necessarily want to pretend it's okay by just like not saying the horrible parts, but you can cut it out and still have the beef of the plot. There's no. The plot is wasps stealing with. A Jewish guy who lends the money. Who
has the audacity to charge interest. That's the thing. Like from a modern standpoint, it's fucking ridiculous. Well, like the idea that somebody's making a profit off of he's a loan shark, and like the idea that that's unheard of the time is to us silly because you know we do it all the time. And you know if you own anything in the United States, you've got interest on it. You know.
If we're going to go back to like all of the characterizations we always go back to in comparisons, like you could cast every character that's not Shylock as a country club member from Caddyshack if you wanted to. Like they can all just be getting together and chumming together. I'm like, well, you need money. I guess we could go to Shylock.
Everybody's played by who's like Anthony Edwards. Everybody's Anthony Edwards and Rick Moranis.
So I think the tough thing for me to decide, like, can this be redeemed or not, is that I feel like throughout the first act, he's giving Antonio the hero's cut. Like it's if I think about it shot in my head, it's shot with a handsome, likable actor as Antonio, and even the first act is in blank verse, so it has rhythm to it. It's lyrical. It's all well written. It comes across well, and so it makes Antonio and everyone around Antonio seem noble and interesting. And no one else has that. When women talk later, they just talk in blank prose. When Shylock is talking to Antonio's friend, they're just talking back and forth in blank prose. But when Antonio walks in, they all start talking in blank verse. And so essentially, like,
I didn't catch that. That's good.
I feel like that's Shakespeare's version of like, who's going to get good lighting, who's going to get good makeup. And like, you know, when you see a famous actor before they were like the starring role, you're like, oh, you don't look as handsome in this movie because they didn't give you the hero's glow up. And
right.
It's hard to get around the fact that like you could put this play on and make Antonio a scumbag, but it doesn't feel like that's what the author's going for.
See, that's interesting because I feel in the third scene here that despite we'll get there when we get there, but I think there are moments where an Antonio is painted as big a part of the problem as Shylock is.
I agree. I guess my biggest thing is like I had very little response to the first scene, except to just think, okay, like this is it's almost like a benign version of Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, in that everyone in town thinks this guy's great. For no reason, he's standing there, Antonio does nothing, and I think 4 different characters just walk on screen, talk about how great he is, talk about how he hasn't done anything with his life, but that's great because he's gonna do great things with his life, and they exit the stage because they're saying, oh, here comes someone better. They'd probably be a better use of your time than I would be. You're great, Antonio. I just want to get out of your way just so you can enjoy your day and not have to talk to a schlub like me. I would love to have dinner with you sometime because, God, Antonio, if everyone could be as great as you, it'd be great. And there's no sign to me that Antonio, like, I don't know, understands this as anything other than reality. Like he's
yeah. Well, that's the thing is that it starts with him saying that he's sad. I'm sad. And then his friends come in, and I wrote down that Solanio and Salarino, the first 2 friends that he's talking to, are like the worst friends to talk to because he's like, I'm so sad. And they're like, oh, is it because your ships are, you've got all these business interests in ships and they're, and they're different places in the world. And that's incredibly risky. If that were me, man, I'd be worried all the time. Like they both go into these long monologues about how, oh man, if I was doing what you're doing right now, I'd be shitting my pants, dude. But you're, you know what, I should leave. Like they both, as soon as
right, that could be good if they both realize what dicks they're being. They're like, oh, actually,
they kind of do too, because when Lorenzo and was it Ballasino? No, Graciano. When Lorenzo and Graciano come on, and they're like, oh yeah, these 2 guys are way more. Like they're better to talk to about this kind of shit than, and then they just leave. They bounce.
You're right. Okay, that could actually be great if it's essentially like, I'm sad, but I can't put my finger on it. And the friends are like, is it because you're in debt up to your eyeballs and you could be in like, it's the Middle Ages and you're guessing that things won't be wrecked at sea as always happens. You've made terrible choices.
There's something really funny about it.
They're just like, shit, I'll get out of here. Talk to these guys.
Yeah, and then that's the thing is Graciano, fun time Graciano comes on and he's like, why are you so sad? Why are you so sad? Life is so happy. Right. And he again, the worst people to talk to. And he's like Oh, that's another thing about Solanio and Salarino. They leave with say, "We leave you now with better company," and I was like, "They're right." Like
Right.
they knew exactly. Like, you know what? We're not great at this. Here comes two guys who are a little better company than we are. Um, and then Graciano again with the, "Hey, everything's okay. Hey, come on, you have dinner with me. It's gonna be cool." And then he leaves because Bassanio has business, right?
Yeah.
He's in a bad spot financially. He needs money because he wants to woo this girl Portia. And what I like about Bassanio says of Graciano after he leaves is he says Graciano speaks an infinite deal of nothing, which to me is like the modern. It's like the Elizabethan version of he talks a wealth of shit. This guy, but
Yeah.
just he's just full of shit. It's okay. But what's interesting is like before Bassiano asks for the loan from Antonio, he's got this like metaphor that he uses about shooting an arrow.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of questions about it because he's like, when I'm in the woods and I shoot an arrow and I don't know where it went, I shoot another arrow in the same direction.
Where it went.
And then I pay attention this time, and then I follow it, and normally I find the arrows. I'm like, what are you fucking talking about?
His metaphor literally is, when I throw money away, and that money's like bad because it's gone, I throw good money after it.
Yeah.
and then it's wonderful. Yeah, I guess in reading it, it didn't come through to me that like Shakespeare knew these were morons, but you could totally write this as like, no, these are morons, and like, because it is the stupidest metaphor and the stupidest advice. Like, when you're just not paying attention, you shit the bed.
Yeah.
Find that if you shit the bed the second time, then you'll figure out where all the feces is in your bed.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like it's not like water where you're like pouring water to see where the land lies.
Right.
You shot a fucking arrow. Like if you're like too distracted to shoot an arrow, maybe you should have been shooting an arrow in the first place. And then to top that off, right? Why would you shoot another one to go find?
Right, no, but it's wonderful. It was perfect just the way you said it, because in the act of aiming the arrow, you've solved it in your mind.
Yeah, that's it.
If you can let go of the bow, then like where you're walking. You think you're shooting it towards that bush, and then you just go look at that bush.
I mean, I think the moral of the story is don't go hunting with Bassanio. The guy's a fucking lunatic. She's shooting arrows all over the place because he's too like in his own head to be shooting arrows anywhere.
It would also be great because that they do that thing in Romeo and Juliet where they make their guns like the brand name is broadsword. But if you just substitute it in like shotgun for this, it's just like, sometimes you shoot in the woods, you can't remember where you've shot. Shoot again.
Right. I mean, could you imagine somebody saying that? And then the funny thing is that that's his segue into asking for money.
Yeah.
Which is like, if I'm Antonio, I'm like, I don't exactly follow, but okay.
Well, but that's what makes Antonio's entire logic is like, it's a great summation of like country club, waspy, upper crust racism, because all he ever says is like, well, among friends, I would always just loan for free. And it's like, well, yes. And we know what among friends means for you. You don't
that's a good point.
You don't have to say, I don't like these groups, or I'm racist, or I look down my nose at people of different religions, because we know who your friends are. And so it's easy for you to say, well, anyone at the country club, I'll be happy to loan money to without interest, because that's just what friends do. But we know from how people, when you make him a buffoon and you surround him with buffoons, you know that like, well, you must just be well-to-do buffoons that have been protected by what happens if you don't use your money well, because you all wouldn't continue to be rich if you acted this way, if you weren't protected by your names or just a huge amount of wealth or something else, because what you're saying is stupid.
Yeah, and Bassanio makes the concession that he's been living beyond his means, and the only way you can live beyond your means really is that if you've got friends who can support you. You know what I mean?
When some people live beyond their means, they feel bad. When other people live beyond their means, they lose their home and they're homeless.
Yeah, and like this guy's whole thing is like, yeah, you know, I'm a little strapped for cash because there's this girl I like, you know, like it's like the whole thing's kind of seedy. Like it just doesn't, you know.
And I like that in this world, there's no confusion about the fact that like you need money to try and woo this woman. There's no like, oh, I got to get the dad out of the way because the dad wants a dowry or something. It's just like, no, there's no reason to think that that Bassanio thinks that he can get this woman without showing up with lots of money. At the same time, we learn in the next scene that that's, as far as we know, not true, that he's the only guy on earth that Portia really cares about. But in scene one, essentially, like, there's no doubting that, like, well, there's this woman, she's perfect, I want to go after her, I can't even bother unless I get this money. And so
yeah, there's like it's like there's a buy-in for Portia's hand.
Yeah.
You know, like you have to have it's $30,000 stakes, so you got to, you know, like it's weird. It's such a weird thing.
But it's interesting that like, so on the one hand, like Antonio thinks he lives in this world where friends can share money however they want, without interest because that's what friends do. But it's also a world that assumes that you're going to need a dowry and it's not even commented upon. So on the one hand, you act like money doesn't matter, and on the other hand, no one blinks at the idea of like, well, yeah, you can't woo someone without laying $50,000 down. That's just inherent.
So it's definitely believable in that respect that it's just the world that these people live in where you have to put a down payment on a wife.
Yeah.
To be taken seriously. Well, to be considered one of the contenders, which he is, like as you say, we learn in the next scene that he kind of already is.
Yeah,
but like they haven't seen each other in a while or whatever.
Is there anything else from the first scene that jumped out to you?
Just one thing, and it's this. I love Shakespeare, and you know I know we shit on him in this podcast, but I love Shakespeare. But there's a line that Antonio has that I think is a great example of why people, especially like high school students, hate Shakespeare. And he says, because, you know, Bassanio goes into his whole, like, I'm just saying, I kind of need this money, like just kind of weaving his way around it. And Antonio finally says to him, look, just tell me what I need to do. But this is the way he says it. Then do but say to me what I should do, that in your knowledge may be by me be done. And I read that and I was like, this is exactly why people hate Shakespeare. Like that's the line where, like, it's like, just fucking say it straight. Like, what, like that in your knowledge may by me be done. It's such a like roundabout way to say, just tell me what you want me to do. Yeah. Like it really is like, because obviously Shakespeare's full of this like flowery language. It's very beautiful, but that's one of the examples of one of those things where it could have been a lot clearer, dude. Like you could have just cut to the chase. I
like that if instead of giving them the hero's cut, we give them the asshole's cut instead, then like you could use that sentence to just be like, Jesus Christ, these fucking people. I hope they get their comeuppance. I hope this motherfucker makes a really bad deal in the next 15 minutes because that would be hilarious.
If only he would make the very worst deal he possibly could.
just and completely negotiate himself into it by being a prick.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. He starts out this scene as he's sad, I'm sad, and he never really gets to the reason why. And then at the end of the scene, I'm like, well, maybe it's because you co-sign on these loans that, you know, using your own wealth, you know, while your own wealth is like tied up in these risky business ventures. Maybe that's why you're so sad, you dope.
It's because you're bankrupting yourself just to prove to yourself that you don't care about money.
Right.
And you're realizing that you're full of shit.
Yeah, I think maybe we've cracked your depression.
Maybe you've suppressed everything that actually matters to you just to try and make it seem like nothing's a big deal amongst the boys.
Yeah.
And all your friends keep walking up and talking to you about how stressful it would be to have all your money out to sea, but you can't process it because you convinced yourself that this is what it is to be a guy, is to not worry about these things. So you just suppress it and you're going insane and you can't understand why.
I think if we sat Antonio down in a modern therapist chair, that's what would come out. But unfortunately, it being Elizabethan times.
At no point would he make a series of racist insults that set him up for a whole lot of chicanery. Okay, so moving on to scene 2.
Oh, we should point out that Antonio doesn't actually have the money, so he says, "Well, let's go to Venice because I know some money lenders there. They might be able to help."
So So I missed that. They say let's go to Venice. So in fact, is he of Venice, or does the title make no goddamn sense?
If they're anywhere, they must be outside of Venice because he says something to the effect of, "I know some money lenders in Venice." Let me just get that bit, because if in fact they're not in Venice, I don't think they ever tell us where in fact they are.
Oh no, you're right. It's the end. So Antonio in douche speak says, "Thou knowest that all my fortunes are at sea. I neither have I money nor commodity. I don't have any money," he basically says. "Therefore, go forth, try what my credit can in Venice do." So yeah, basically, like, people know me in Venice. Let's go there.
Okay, so yeah, he does say, yeah. So he knows some people. Yeah, he's like, "Let's go to Venice. There's some Jews that I constantly berate in front of a crowd of people, but it's okay. Let's see what they can do for us."
Fucking sons of bitches.
The audacity of these people.
The unadmitted fuckery. So the interesting thing about the second scene is I like Portia.
She's cool.
At the beginning, she's so we meet Portia. We've just heard from Bassanio that Portia's the one he wants. She's beautiful, she's rich, so there's princes and folks coming over from all around the Mediterranean to try and woo her. Actually, from all over Europe and North Africa coming over to woo her. And at the beginning, she's talking to, I don't know, her handmaiden or something, Nerissa. And Nerissa basically sets up her situation, which is that her dad died, and her dad set up a weird puzzle that will define who she marries.
Of course he did.
And now various men are coming to woo her, but as they get there, they have to kind of like figure out the puzzle. But as the scene goes on, I like her less and less because she has like a Don Rickles routine where she rips apart all the men.
These hockey pucks.
I found it charming for like the first 2, and in part because in the last one she's racist, but I feel like it steadily just gets meaner and weirder as it goes on. And so I find it like, I don't know, I liked it at the beginning. By the end, I was just like, oh, I think you're one of the bad rich people in Venice instead of being a likable person overall.
Yeah. I mean, she also does start saying she's sad as well. I was like, I wrote in my notes, is this a Woody Allen movie all of a sudden? Like, everybody's depressed.
It's all
everybody's
sad,
dealing with their depression.
Sad, well-to-do people. In the portion where I like her, she has a sentence which I want to steal to use at work. In that Nerissa is she's kind of being a busybody, telling her what she has to do, and Portia just replies to her, "Good sentences and well pronounced." Like, I just want to steal this way to just like compliment someone and fucking ignore them. Like, Nerissa tells her like 3 things to do and does it in a philosophical manner, and she's just like, "Oh, he said that so well."
And the pronunciation was clear. I could hear the words.
So I have nothing more to add to that shit that you just said.
Well, what's interesting is that you say that Portia's dad is dead and he set up this puzzle. And my only question is, why are we still doing this? If dad is dead, dad is dead. He's fucking dead.
Well,
and this whole scene is Portia saying, "Oh, I'm never going to find a husband because somebody has to figure out the 3 casket game," which is basically just the old ball and shell routine. Like, that's all it is. You're picking, and they don't actually explain there's one that's gold, there's one that's silver, and there's one that's lead. And it turns out the lead one is the right one. So, like, I guess it's like a test of humility. Like, you go with the least.
Yeah, and it's always the fucking lead one. It doesn't matter if you're Indiana Jones or if you're Bassanio. If someone tells you to pick 3 things and there's good, very good, and bad, you choose bad, and then you look wise. Like, that's just always what you fucking do.
Yeah. Yes.
But
it's funny you say that because as soon as in Indiana Jones, it was the
carpenter.
The cup was it was the shittiest cup on the table. That was Right. But anyway, the guess the casket thing. The man is dead. Like I know that it was in his will, but come on, like isn't there somebody who runs the house now that can just say, yeah, we don't have to do this?
Well, also it's like a really rickety tower of rationalizations. So what Narissa says is, your dad was virtuous. She says he was always virtuous, where it's just like, fuck off. No one's always virtuous.
Right. He was Santa Claus.
Then from virtuous, she jumps to holy men get inspired before death. At no point did we say he was holy, but like, okay, he's a good guy. Holy men like have visions before death. He came up with a puzzle, which means that only the right man will solve the puzzle, which means that only someone you love could be the right man. So the guy you love is going to solve the puzzle, so don't worry about it. It's the ravings of a dying old man. It's clearly stupid. I guess one of the things I probably liked Portia at the beginning, because it seemed like there were some stakes. It seems like, oh, you're stuck in a bullshit machine, and that's terrible. And your assistant is your assistant, but she's probably still like a part of the system, so she can lock you into this. So I like your contempt for her, but at the same time, like, it could be less bullshit.
Yeah, it could be. It really could be. And I don't understand. Like Portia seems pretty strong-willed, but it never occurs to her in the scene to be just like, why can we just stop doing this? Like, why do we do that?
What if we decide the answer and I tell the guy I like what the answer is? Like if Portia and Narissa could say to each other, we have puzzled so hard and we've never figured out. And if we did, God knows, we'd just tell a guy I like what it is. But it seems an impossible thing to figure out. This thing that everyone in the audience figured out soon as we said it was gold, silver, and lead.
And also, like, she talks about how many suitors she has. Do they not talk to one another? Like, do they not go out and say, yeah, I chose the gold one, turns out it was wrong. Yeah, I chose the silver one, turns out it was wrong. Like, didn't somebody hear, like, the two, like, oh, everybody's chooses
on your
gold
way
and
out,
silver.
like, you're about to, it's fucking middle of the millennium. You're getting back on your boat for 3 months to go back to Scotland. You see the other guy, you'd be like, hey, don't pick silver.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Do the next guy a solid. If you get it wrong, tell him. Like, this is stupid. There's no reason multiple princes our age should waste years of our lives sailing around Europe to guess wrong in a stupid Price is Right game. Like, this is...
Maybe they all had to sign a release or something at the end, like a do not disclose, like what Disney does when you're in a movie for them, like a Star Wars movie. They have you sign all this shit.
We'll fucking find you and murder. If it turned out that Narissa was like the little girl assassin from Game of Thrones who would hunt you down and kill you,
Arya Stark.
Yes, exactly. Like if you're eating something and then you realize that you're eating your own finger because you put it in your pie, then what a twist!
Diabolical. But I mean, at the end of the day, we realize that none of the suitors, of course, are suitable for Portia. In fact, she says of one, I had rather be married to a death's head with a bone in his mouth than to either of these. We like the first two suitors, which is one of my favorite things that anybody's ever said. I had rather be married to a death's head with a bone in his mouth.
She's out of the gate. She's really strong. What I really like about the first guy, and what I like is that you can tell that, like, what I got from the beginning was that she hates the process. So there's actually nothing wrong with these guys, but she's just looking for reason to pick them apart. And the first guy, she's like, he thinks he's great. All he fucking talks about is his horse. He's even proud that he puts horseshoes on his horse. I think he's stupid, and I'm pretty sure that his mom fucked the blacksmith. And
yeah,
I love from her point of view that, like, someone who has a hobby, the only reason they could have that hobby, if they have a hobby that you don't like, the only reason they could have that hobby is because their mom slept with someone who had the job of that hobby.
Right.
It seems like a fun rich person's, like, inability to understand the world, where it's just like, there's just no way someone could actually enjoy that. So I have to assume that he's an illegitimate son of the blacksmith.
That has to be fucked in you. You don't just walk around with blacksmith talents.
You can't you can't be rich and like nailing things onto horses' feet. That gets bred out of you. It seems like it's a nice dig. And then the second guy, she's just like, oh yeah, he's sad sometimes, and that'll only get worse as you get older. It's funny, and it's like, oh, that's kind of true. If you're sad in your 20s, you're probably not like a fun guy in your 50s. But it's just so merciless.
And we should point out that this is not a comedy. Merchant of Venice is not. I don't believe it's considered a comedy.
Well,
I believe
in
it's
the
considered...
intro, I read the intro, and it was interesting because they said it could be it. People have gone back and forth about whether or not it's a comedy or how it should be put on. But for most of its history, it was considered a comedy.
Oh,
And
interesting. I didn't know
if you
that.
put on a comedy, then it's just like, oh, because you're having fun with racism. Like that's really
Then it's 100% racist if
Yeah.
it's a comedy.
If it's-
You know, like...
If this is a knee slapper for you, then we
Which
know.
actually, it kind of like when she talks about the suitors, like the first two are about their personality, but then the last three, I think, are about where they're from, which I think is definitely, I mean, that's definitely where like we're getting into like the prejudiced, stereotypes and all that stuff. In fact, I think Shakespeare even takes a shot at the English audience, because the English suitor of the suitors, the English suitor is the unlearned moron who doesn't have language, and like that's definitely a dig at them. Like I'm sure the English audience responded to that, because it's like, oh yeah, of the suitors here in Italy, the English one was the biggest dummy of the lot.
Yeah, and I found I couldn't quite wrap my head around, like, I don't know, like how that was supposed to land, or in part I just couldn't quite get the jokes.
Because he's done it before. Remember, there was I can't remember which other play it was. Maybe it was Two Gentlemen of Verona, but there was another play where they reference another an English dude, and it was like the English dude is like not culturally not interesting or whatever it was. Like he's done that before, where it's like he's got to be taking digs at the audience. Like, I mean, that makes perfect sense to me.
I'm just interested. I'm wondering how it fell with them, because like the three in the middle, I candidly struggled with, because there's a Scottish prince and a French prince on either side.
The French Prince of Bel-Air, we should point out.
She raps that one, which is surprising.
In Wesleyan, born and raised.
Oh, the English one was from Philly. Okay, I get it. But the French and Scottish one is a reference to some fucking historical thing going on at that time, which is the worst thing he does, is when he does contemporary jokes about wars going on in the past century, and it's just like, I don't know, it needs to be cut in every production ever, and it pains me to read it and read the footnotes and say like, oh, the Scots were actually allied with the French at this time, and blah 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 with the Habsburgs. And
is that what that was about? I didn't have the footnotes, so I was just like, so like maybe the Scots are pushovers. Like I mean,
you are the better for it. Thank God that you don't have the footnotes, because they did not enrich the experience in any way. And
in fact, they brought it down.
And
I understand less now.
The last one is just then they're like, oh, and there's a Moroccan prince coming, and she says in a way the most racist thing you could say, because she says, even if he was as noble as a saint, he's so black I wouldn't want to marry him.
Right.
And so it's one thing to think in your head a racial stereotype, but out of that racial stereotype, you're supposed to think this is not something I could get along with. But
I'm not into black guys.
But to start with, even if they were perfect, I wouldn't, because of the color of their skin. is 4-dimensional racism. Like it's 2-dimensional racism to just assume that it can't work out. It's 3-dimensional racism to just not want to bother because of institutions, but to know that people are the same.
Yeah.
And then say, but I would never do it because it's not something I dig.
It's like Portia's like a birther. Like she's like she's like well, nope, he's black, but he's got, his record is amazingly clear, and he's a great nope.
You signed up for Match.com, and you guys like everything the exact same way. He is your soulmate. Nope. Can't be my soulmate.
Not with the black skin, he can't be.
So if you can find some way for him to change the color of his skin, great. Otherwise, I ain't doing it.
You've turned me around on Portia because I was like, oh, she's pretty cool. I must have skipped over the Moroccan thing because I wasn't. I was like, I get it. She doesn't like all these guys.
Again, you can make this scene like 3 guys, and it's great. But it goes like great zinger, okay zinger, pretty good zinger, weird historical references, making fun of the audience, and then flat out racist.
Straight up racism.
It's just, I could just see the director being like, I think this could be a pretty quick scene. I think we established Portia is she wants to marry him. Let's just get back over there.
I think that's the perfect arc of any like middling comedian too. It starts with like a few good zingers, and then it just descends into
in the set.
It goes into just rampant racism at the end.
So
of it.
How about that minority?
The old Michael Richards routine. Loses his head a little bit.
Scene 2. It's the Michael Richards routine. I'm dying up here. What can I do?
What can I do to liven this up?
Portia just screaming at the audience, which we know the Elizabethans ate it up. They're just like, see, this is why I come to the Billy Shakespeare shows. He always tells his actors, if you're losing them, just walk back and forth and just scream. Just scream.
There's a great I don't know if you've ever watched the Graham Norton show, the interview show that is hosted by Graham Norton. He's an excellent interviewer. Like the whole idea of the show is that it's celebrities. They kind of get them lubed up with alcohol, and it's very casual. And people tend to be really fun. But there's this one comedian, I can't remember his name. I wish I could remember. But he was telling a story about his first time doing stand-up, and he says he was nervous, and this other comedian said, "Well, this is what you do. You start with some crowd work, and asking people where they're from, right? You're ask, oh, where are you from? Wales, blah blah blah." And he says, what you're waiting for is for somebody to say they're from Kent. And then you come back with, would you call me? Right. Like it's suggesting that it sounds like cunt. And sorry, folks, to bring that one on you. But the word is cunt. But he says he got really drunk, and he went on and couldn't remember any of the punchlines to all these stereotype jokes of people in the region. And so he just it descended to the point where he's like, is anybody here from Kent? And somebody goes, yeah, because he already blew the punchline by saying, is anybody here from Kent? And somebody goes, yes. And he goes, you're a cunt. And then that was the end of the thing. And then he was roundly beaten, I'm sure. That's the beauty of comedy, like knowing that the ship's going down, and then you just resort to the most angry stereotypes you could possibly think of.
Listen, Sensei, you let me down. You told me that I'd win the audience over if I went there.
It's such a weird instinct to be like, I know what'll get him back. I'll just insult the shit out of him. Let's just start calling people names. Makes perfect sense. I'll get them on my side.
The idea of starting with crowd work just tells me that I could never do stand-up because, I don't know, just the idea of not knowing what the fuck would come out of your mouth and trying to get something funny out of, where are you from? Tennessee?
Todd Barry has a whole he's got a whole special on it. In fact, he's doing it again virtually. He's got a whole thing called the crowd work tour. The whole show is crowd work, which has to be incredibly difficult.
That would just give me a panic attack. And also give me a panic attack to watch him work, and it would give me a panic attack to go to the show because not for his sake, but because you get so many people opting into that show who want to be the guy that's interacting, whenever the person in the crowd tries to be funny, it's just you are the straight person, you are the or whatever, someone from the crowd with a question tries to like make it a funny question, it's just like stop. Just be a straight person. Whew.
Yeah, stop trying to be entertaining.
Yeah.
Nobody's here to see you, sir.
If you could be on the stage, you would be. So don't.
So anyway, Act 2 is, or Scene 2, Act 1, Scene 2 is a perfect arc of a failing comedian, Portia, just Shecky Green over here trying to make it up and just going into straight racism by the end of it. He's black.
The crowd just gets quieter and quieter. Oh, hey, Narissa, what about that fifth black guy? Oh, he's black. Oh, is he? Well, guess what?
How black is he?
Crowd, the Elizabethan crowd yelling help.
Well, maybe Shakespeare was using it as a segue, because it segues right into some.
No, it does.
Some gritty racism, and
it's an on ramp.
Yeah,
it's a clear on ramp. He's just so, and also like so. As far as the plot, as we said, coming out of Scene 2, we know that there's no stakes for this money changing hand, because if Bassanio would just walk up to Portia and say, "Will you marry me?" she'd be like, "Yes." Mm-hmm. Figure out the stupid puzzle. But there's no, like, this deal does not need to happen.
Right.
We also think that like Portia's dad has like come up with this prophecy, so that's driving the plot. So this all may be preordained, but as Antonio's about to just like completely shit the bed, we know there's no reason to do this. I think, again, if you want to, like, you could direct the first two scenes, just have them both be terrible people. Like Antonio, a terrible person, Bassanio, not a great person, Portia, a terrible person. So if you wanted to, you could come into this scene. And I think it opens with Bassanio and Shylock negotiating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's basically like, well, can I have it? Can I have it?
And Shylock trying to like do math in his head, and he's like, can I do it? Will you do it? Will you do it? And he's just like, can I just stop and think for a second? Let me look exactly where it opens. Yeah, it's Shylock and Bassanio talking. And they're just talking about figures. And basically, I feel like until Antonio comes up and basically triggers Shylock is just trying to do figures in his head. Mm-hmm. Like Bassanio walks up to him and says, like, I need a loan. Can I get $3,000 for 3 months? And what would the interest be? Shylock's just like, okay, so this is what I know about you. Carry the one. Who's vouching for you? Antonio? Okay, he's rich, so they do it. And like Shylock is just trying to do math, and they just keep disrupting him throughout this. Like, this is all avoidable.
Well, yes and no, because I think what I found particularly egregious in this scene is that I think it might be the longest aside that we've seen for any character that we've read in plays thus far. Because Shylock has a straight up like evil villain aside to the audience, where he's got like a pretty lengthy monologue, that starts with Antonio, I hate him. Yeah. I hate him for he is a Christian, and it goes on laying out everything that Antonio's done, and how he wants to punish him, and all that. And I was like, that's really like super villainy. Like it's
it's not even like Lex Luthor-y, because Lex Luthor does not say, I hate Superman because he's better than me. He invents reason in his head. Like, but to just come out and say, I hate him for he's a Christian, like, it's not writing. Like, it's something you circle when you're writing, and you're saying like, okay, this is Shylock's motivation. But
yeah, he should never say it. yeah. Like, show don't tell, folks. Show don't tell.
So I feel like you could, since we're in this world where Antonio and folks around him act so obnoxiously, you could understand that like this is Shylock's vision of how people work in the society, and that like, well, I hate everyone because they act this way, and like we have to demean ourselves in these ways, and so I hate just about everyone in Venice. But it's odd to be in Venice where everyone's Christian and be doing this deal and turn to the audience and say, I hate him in particular because he is Christian. Mm-hmm. I don't know, the line just doesn't work at at all, and it seems oddly out of place. Like if it wasn't, well, I guess if it was one of Shakespeare's racist things, I guess it would kind of work. Like if you said, "I hate him because his skin is black," like that would fit in the other ones. It wouldn't
Yeah.
feel the same.
But the thing though is that I feel like he says that, and then everything that follows that is explaining why he hates him, and it really isn't because he's a Christian. It's
Right.
because Antonio's a piece of shit to him. You know
Well-
what I mean? So it's like either Shylock is woefully generalizing his hatred, you know, like because everything that follows that is an itemized list of how Antonio has wronged him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like he's got plenty. Shylock has plenty of motive, but not much of it is really rooted in the Christianity part. So it as you say, it's a weird line. It's a weird thing to say.
Right. So if you cut that line, then it's the itemized list all makes sense. But since you lead with that line, it's almost when you put it that way, you're saying to the audience that Jewish people think this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you get an itemized list that like backs it up, but you're leading with it as if like it's almost as if like what we're saying is that like you would circle this when you were writing someone, but then you would give them actual motives. And so the anti-Christian motivation is actually what he tells himself. Like that's what's his consciousness thinks, but subconsciously he hates him because he's been humiliated by this guy.
Right.
Again and again. But it's incredibly fucked up to in telling that story say like, well, we all know this is how we assume Jewish people think about Christians. Like it's
See, that's what's interesting. Like, and I think we should in every episode now have just like a credit corner where like, do we give Shakespeare the credit that is due? Because like, is this just a stereotypical character? Like my question is it a character who is just kind of ignorantly following this blatant, you know, like this just like total generalization of an entire culture, or is Shakespeare trying to explain where that kind of idea might come from? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like is he lifting the veil on you know, that kind of social hatred that the Jews experienced at the time, or is it just, or are we giving him too much credit? Like that's and we've talked about this before in other plays where like, are we overanalyzing it because we live in a modern time with way more things written about Shakespeare's plays than, you know, we'd like to admit.
and
Or is he as genius as, you know, we let him on to be, you know?
And the challenging things I'm trying to think about any other time in any movie or play where a character turns to the screen and says, "I hate him because of this." Like it's just such an odd statement. Like it just doesn't happen. Not only does it not happen in Shakespeare, but it doesn't happen. Period. To just say, to say something in this way, and then as you say, like he just itemizes everything after that needs to be said. Like it's almost as if like if you were going to give him way too much credit, or if you were going to think about like how to put it on today, then like, or no, not how to put it on today, but if you're going to give him way too much credit, you could say like, I'm going to say the dumb thing out loud that my QAnon audience thinks is true. Like it's like if you have Archie Bunker say like, well, the Jews run the media and I know that, but here's what else is a stressor on me and makes me angry at my television. Like that's a way that it could work where like you just like, all right, I'm just going to say it straight out at the beginning and then we'll actually develop the character afterwards.
Yeah, almost like if you had the act. You better get down. Sorry, my cat's about to get on my keyboard. That's all I need.
Oh,
like
that's all I
boop,
need.
and everything just goes. Brrr. Like if you had the actor playing Shylock say that line in almost a mocking way, like I know what you're thinking. You know, I hate him for he is a Christian.
Yeah.
Right. That kind of thing. It's like, no, I actually hate him because every time we're in the marketplace, he fucking brings out my being a Jew and berates me in front of everybody for doing business. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not an idiot like him who's giving money out for free. and he wonders why he's sad.
To his
You know?
idiot friends.
Yeah, to his
Idiots
idiot
surrounded by
friends.
idiots.
Blowing money on something, as you just pointed out, he doesn't need the money to do this thing that he's saying he needs the 3,000 ducats for.
He never evaluates if these people can actually pay him back. He just says, "Are they friends? Well, then take my money."
Yeah, and so and you look at me like I'm the dick. Like, so it's like, it really is like, I don't know. I think it's really interesting to question whether or not, because he says this, he says, I hate him for he's a Christian, and then he goes on and says, Antonio is constantly talking about the usury that we have here, all the interest rates, and that he calls interest, and we're making money, a perfectly normal way, and he berates my religion in public in front of everybody, and then what's interesting, like right after that, Shylock mentions, biblical verse, and talks about, a story that Antonio immediately comes back to by basically implying that Shylock's a devil.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like the more I read the scene, I'm like, I don't know. I think like maybe we give Shakespeare the credit on this one, where like maybe it is kind of like, because Antonio's acting like a total dick after that.
He's acting like a total dick, and actually, I haven't read this play in over 20 years, and when Shylock says what Antonio does, I assumed that like, well, this is hearsay from a biased narrator, and so it's probably somewhere in between. Antonio probably like said something, and I remember feeling like Shylock was painted with too broad a brush, and so like it's probably not this bad. And then Antonio walks on screen, he's just an anti-Semitic piece of shit. And so I was surprised that like out of the gate, I don't know, maybe I just read too much into the like friendly way Shakespeare was painting Antonio in the first scene, but I didn't, even after Shylock says this guy's an asshole, he always berates me in public and says racist things in public. I was surprised at how racist Antonio was.
Yeah, he just pours it on, like especially,
Yeah.
like, it's funny because it's almost like you mentioned QAnon before. It's like it's like Shylock's like telling that, is it Jeremiah? I can't remember what story he's telling. Jeremiah and the Lambs. I can't remember.
Something that I don't know the Bible, so I couldn't really follow. But
I don't remember either.
It's Jacob.
Jacob.
Yeah.
Okay, so like he's telling the story, and then to Bassanio, and again, like thinking how racist and awful Antonio is. Like, this is the kid that you brought to this dude to get the loan, and you're just like basically saying, yeah, he says, I wrote it down here, the devil can cite scripture for his purpose.
Yeah, no, they're like, they just imagine. So first of all, they go to this guy, and this guy is making conversation with him. He's talking about the part of the Bible that's in their shared culture, and this guy that they're asking money for, Antonio just turns to his friend and says, "Look, the monkey can talk." It's just, it's amazingly fucked up. And I also like the fact that they have Shylock do the calculations and say, I'll have to borrow from another guy I know to loan you this money. So it's not even like he has the money. Like, he's kind of going to bat for Bassanio here. Like,
this chain of loans, by the way, is getting really long.
Yeah.
like Antonio didn't have the money. Shylock doesn't have the money now.
Speaking of like two things that I have no ability to handle is crowd work and this kind of chain of loans. Like, the idea that I would be deep in debt with 3 ships at sea, betting on a guy with 3 ships at sea, loaning to another guy, like, if anything, like, making them that present makes usury feel like all the more like this archaic thing to worry about. Like, of course, like, you are exposed to a tremendous amount of risk, Shylock. There's nothing wrong with you getting an extra 5% when this comes back.
It's like, I don't know, like, the more the scene goes on.
The other thing I like is since Shylock says to himself that he has to go to another guy to get the money to give to Bassanio, and since in this universe Jewish people charge interest, and that's just an accepted fact, we know that Shylock is borrowing something at interest to finance this. And he offers to give this loan interest free because Antonio is such a racist asshole and he doesn't want to take the bait. So, to your point about giving Shakespeare credit, like, we are establishing stakes for Shylock here. Shylock is not all about money. He's going to lose money on this overall, but he's willing to lose money and expose himself to greater risk to not fulfill the stereotype that this awful person is just like poking him in the chest, being like, I bet this is the point where you're going to charge interest, right? They walk in and say, well, no, Antonio walks in and says, well, you know, I don't believe in interest, but I know you do. So let's do this deal and you figure out the interest.
I'm going to tell that to my bank next time. I know you believe in interest, but I don't. So
and so Shylock's figuring out the interest and he says the racist biblical thing. And then he says to Shylock's face, he's like, and this is probably the part where you're going to tell us about the interest, right? And it's like, we've established this 3 times. And you're like, and now you're about to say what the number is, aren't you? Because you're Jewish.
Yeah.
It's just like
Antonio's like the guy going to the car dealership. He's like, okay, let's see the real numbers here. You know, this is where you fuck us, right? You know.
Well, yeah, sir. Like, if you came in with cash, we would charge you less. But you're asking to do this on layaway, so we're gonna charge you. Okay, here it comes.
Here it comes. There's always a catch.
How do you sleep at night, you piece of shit? Sir, you're asking for 64 payments on this used Honda. Like,
you're a piece of shit.
I'm just curious. Like, is that?
I don't think you understand how business works, sir.
How do you fucking sleep at night? So yeah, Antonio, like, I picture Antonio just poking him in the chest and saying, here it comes. And Shylock in that moment just says, you know what? You're right. No interest. So, or no, Antonio was poking him in the chest and he's like, listen, if I were you, first of all, interest is beneath me. If I actually wanted to get someone over on someone, then you know what I would do? I would just think about, like, I only loan my money to friends. And so if I ever loaned to someone I wanted to do this, I would just think of them as my enemy and think about what I would want to do if I ever got leverage over them. And Shylock's like, you know what? You're right. Let's let bygones be bygones. You're my friend. No interest. Take the money. It's fine. You're a great guy. You've got 3 big ships out to sea. I'm sure you'll be fine. But just in case.
Yeah, he's like, I like how he throws it in kind of like, you know what would be a hoot? Like, he says something like, it'll be like a merry jest. You know, it'd be funny if
your idea.
If it was your idea, remember, if you don't give me the money back, I'm just gonna take a pound of your flesh. Wouldn't that be funny? It's like a little, like a pound. Like, what's a pound? Your dick, maybe. You know, I'll take your dick or a hand.
Because Antonio's just like, if you were a man, that's what you'd do. And you'd be like, okay, I guess. Thanks for being such a stand-up guy that you'd show me, a Jewish person, how to be a man. So I'll take your advice, Antonio, and we'll just see what happens. Thanks. You're right. No interest needed. And I didn't realize it until saying it that he's losing money on the deal, but he's just not going to let this racist prick, like, poke him in the chest and say, like, this is it. Here comes the interest. Duh.
Yeah, and again, like I you know, again, do we give him credit? I don't know. This scene shapes up in a way that makes you think that maybe Shylock isn't painted as devilish. I mean, yeah, the pound of flesh certainly is like very like Old Testament-y.
Well,
Old Testament-y, which would be a great name for a mint. harsh mint, like an Altoid.
But that said, like, Antonio's the one that escalates it and says, like, if you were a man, you would just come up with something devious to do to your enemy. And so, like, if there's nothing so far that says, like, Shylock sits at home and, like, has been thinking about how to make this happen. Like, he thinks of this, he thinks up what to do to the guy that doesn't involve any more money on the spot. I mean, it's the metaphor itself is incredibly fucking unfortunate. Like,
yeah,
even if you're going to give Shakespeare credit for, like, thinking it through, it's still insane to, like, have a Jewish character to anything close to like eating blood or asking for blood, asking for
Yeah.
flesh. Anything vampiric, not good. I'm gonna say problematic. So that might be like one of the hardest things that like could you, if you gave it the best possible direction to make Shylock likable here, could you have him like not look like an insane person asking someone for a pound of flesh?
I think you could. I think especially if you play it like we just talked about there, like almost like he's getting the idea from Antonio.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because Antonio does come back and say, hey, if you really wanted to stick it to somebody, and then and Shylock just playing it like, okay,
Yeah, you'd have to find some way for him to be stuck with it for the next 4 acts, and like, why does he stick with and ask for it? But like, yeah, in the scene,
in the scene, it would. I think it would be. I think it's one of those things where it's almost like maybe you could play it where Shylock puts this clause into the contract as almost like wishful thinking, like paying it off as a joke, but like, you know what? I hope your dick falls off. I really do. And then like later on, it's kind of like, well, you did kind of agree that I could take your dick. Like
we both agreed it would be funny if one's enemy's dick fell off.
So I'm here to collect. I honestly think you could, if you paint, because I like reading that scene. I wrote this at the very end of my notes here, is like Antonio treats Shylock like a monster throughout that whole scene. Like a
Yeah.
In fact, Shylock says something to the effect of, you treat me like a dog, and then here you are asking for money. And like my first question should be, what do dogs give money? Do dogs give out money? And like he's right. Like Antonio is a pile of garbage. In fact, one of the last things he says is pretty offensive. He's like, well, he might be Christian yet. He was kind of nice today. I think he's starting to turn. It's like again, like I want to give Shakespeare the credit here. I think there's something interesting in this Christian guy behaving in this like very unchristian way, and like whether or not Shylock, the Shylock's plan is devilish, or is it just just desserts, like something
Right.
that is organic in the scene.
If you establish that Antonio that Antonio and guys like Antonio will always have power in this world, and they will always be shit to this minority unless they're humbled, then that could carry you through. Like, is he gonna make him do it? Is he gonna make him do it? Then like, well, until the audience feels like Antonio is actually changed in any way. And that part that you just said, like, drives home that the fact that Antonio gets to it and she's like, oh, maybe he can be Christian, just drives home that like, well, I guess we need to keep pushing on you because you are still a real piece of shit. So
yeah, and it's like because you look at it from Antonio's point of view. If it's true that he berates Shylock in public, and like it seems like the main problem that Antonio has is the interest, is the fact that this guy's got the audacity to charge interest on people.
He walks into this guy's business like I just picture Antonio. I picture it like Venetian market, and like every time Antonio just making a beeline and for no reason just announcing to everyone like, look at this fucking piece of shit.
Yeah.
I bet is he that guy he's given a home loan to? Guess what? He's gonna fucking charge interest. I wouldn't do that. I would never do that. What a piece of shit he is. God, how do you sleep at night? Oh, I know how. On a bed of cobras or whatever I think anti-Semitic things are in my brain. It turns out like it's great that he said like, oh yeah, he does this all the time at the beginning, because by the end of the scene, you're like, oh yeah, I bet he does. Like, I bet this is a weekend for Antonio. Go to Venice, find Shylock, and just bully the living shit out of him.
Even when you won something from him too, it's almost like he brings his friend. Is like, yeah, my friend Brassanio needs a loan. You piece of shit. Give him a loan, you piece of shit. You done doing the numbers, you piece of shit. Like, it's so aggressive.
I don't think I've ever seen that anywhere before, where someone's just like, "Give me the money, you piece of shit."
Give me the money. Oh, look at him. He's a devil, that piece of shit.
If you were a man, if you were a fucking man, you would have me sign a paper right now that said,
Yeah,
if I
it's
default on this, you cut my balls off. But you're not a man, are you? You're not man enough to make me sign a legally binding document to cut my balls off. No,
It's like
you want a couple bucks, but if you were a man, you would say, I cut my own balls off, shove them up my ass, and jump in the fucking river.
he totally asked for it. It's like that. Do you ever see that Mr. Show sketch where the two guys start a fight in a bar, and they end up getting married and living together for the rest of their lives because it's this like one-upsmanship thing where they bump into each other, and it's like I'll be on your ass all night. It's like, yeah. It's like, prove it. It's like, I'll marry your ass. All right, come on. And then like it cuts to them in front of a priest, and like they're still yelling at each other, but they've got rings on it. And then they end up dying. Like the one dies, and then the other guy is like, yeah, that's right. Like the fight's over. It's like 30 years later, and then he says, I think it's Bob Odenkirk, and he just looks up and he goes, "My life," which I think is funny.
It reminds me of my favorite Darwin Award ever. I remember it was like early internet. For some reason, it stuck in my head in like 2002 or 2004 or something. But in the Darwin Award, which I don't know if it's fact or not, but what it was is a bunch of Polish people trying to show off tough things they could do. They were getting drunk, and one of them swore that he would take a chainsaw and cut his own head off. And he did. He's just like, I'll fucking do it. You don't think I'll do it? I don't think you'll do it. You don't think I'll do it? Watch this. And just, boom. You win, Tomas.
I think that's that, you know, like Siege on the Capitol stuff, the Capitol riot. That's like, that's the same kind of mentality. You don't think I'll fucking march on the Capitol? I'll fucking do it, dude.
I'll fucking live stream it.
I'll live stream. I'll put it on Facebook and everything, dude.
I'll commit to every single crime, and I'll tag myself.
I'll geotag everything.
I'll text my brother-in-law who's in the FBI pictures of myself. So
what a lovely.
I'm one of my favorite things about this podcast is when I don't think it's good and we talk ourselves into it being good. And you completely turned me around on like Shakespeare trying to like make him likable in the first act. I think he's just a DB and it's consistent. So,
well, I mean, again, who are we giving the credit to? Like, is it? I don't know. You can never tell, and that's why Shakespeare is so great, right? I mean, and we've talked about that before in the podcast, where he's kind of the language and premises are ambiguous enough that you can really read whatever. I mean, they're like deep wells into the soul, you know. And whether or not like you kind of see whatever you want to see in it, you know. Like I'm sure that there, you know, I guarantee you that there are folks who read Merchant of Venice and see it as just a complete anti-Semitic rant, and I could see that. But I could also see somebody reading it and saying that Shylock is the hero of the play. I could see that too. You know, like it's amazing. It really is amazing.
What if they did a movie of it next year and it was just totally played for laughs that Antonio had to like cut a whole ass cheek off? They're just like, you'll be fine, but for the rest of your life, you will have one ass cheek.
It's gonna be so
I'll
hard
go
to
easy
ride a
on you.
horse.
Like, listen, I get dragged off at the end, so like things don't end great for old Shylock, but we take some liberties, and the audience knows that you have one ass cheek.
So long, Astonio.
Oh,
and he has to live that down.
There's no padding on his rectum. Oh, I don't know why that was.
Andrew Dice Clay came out.
Andrew Dice.
He's got one ace. Yeah, so like, you know, what is interesting is like when you get to the more famous plays, like it's obvious, like they just stand out more. You know, they're just more. You know, they're they're interesting. They've got, I mean, obviously this is controversial, this play. I would love to know if it was controversial for the time. That would be really interesting. I don't know if anybody's ever written about that or, you know, where we could find that. If you listen to the podcast and happen to know, that would be awesome.
Let us know. Was anti-Semitism cool in 1897?
People wore sunglasses while they were anti-Semites. But yeah, like I would love to know, because it's, again, like you can never tell how much credit you're supposed to give this guy.
Well, but it's also like it's insane that the amount of ammunition he would give to anti-Semites for the past 400 years to be like, no, I'm just putting this play on straight. It's Shakespeare. So it's
good point.
Like saying it's Shakespeare is almost like saying it's in the Bible. You're just saying like, well, you know, it's in the text. So this is a play about how a young guy like gets mixed up, gets over his skis with a Jewish lender, but don't worry, it works out for him in the end. He's doing it all for his buddy, and the bros win out at the end. So don't worry.
That's a really interesting point. Like, again, because Shakespeare is such a blank slate, like you can go, like, obviously from our point of view, you can do this play in a very kind of progressive modern way, but yeah, how many productions between Shakespeare's time and now were just straight up Nazi rallies? You know.
Well, like, it'd be interesting to, like, I don't think wherever this ends up, you could do a good production. I don't know if like you could ever get to the place where you'd feel like, oh, that person's a real Shylock, and I'd be like, no, don't say that. Like,
yes.
Like, you could say that person's a real Romeo. You could say that person's a real Iago. You could say that person's a real Hamlet, many characters. But you can't say like, oh, no, he got into a situation and he just kind of Shylocked it. Like, whoa, dude, I don't care how good a production goes up in theaters in 2022 and completely reframes in the popular mind. I can't imagine ever being like, I don't know. It seems like you can. I was saying that the dead father builds a rickety tower to like decide who his daughter gets married to, and I often feel like that. Like, yeah, we can on this podcast build a rickety tower to see, like, see, it's fine, but you still wouldn't want to go out and be like, yeah, whoo, you know who my coworker reminds me of. Various other Shakespearean characters you could say, but I would never, ever.
Is it Falstaff? No, it's Shylock.
Even Falstaff would be fine. Like, he's a funny guy. I'm not saying he's drunk. You wouldn't necessarily mean they were drunk if you called them Falstaff, but
yeah, I mean, I think that's what I love about the podcast is that, you know, there just is no one way to look at them. You know, there's no one way to interpret any of these things, and the spin that we could give on this, I'm sure, you know, there's I don't know how many neoconservatives are reading lots of Shakespeare, but like, you know, I'm sure there's like a whole other spin that could easily be done, you know, like, and it would be valid. You know,
you can imagine the subreddits where it's just, and I remember enough of the play to know that it's like Shrew, where it's just like you can get through all 5 acts, but it's not going to work out for the person that we're thinking of as if not protagonist, then the person who has the best moral case throughout it. So you can cast it as a horror film, but it's not. But in that, it's not like the other Shakespeare's. Usually, the person who is actually the moral actor gets the last word and is not humiliated.
Right.
And that's not how it ends up for our women or our Jewish person in this play. So,
yep.
Yeah, like I think like you can always say like, yeah, I really feel like that's the best way to put it on. And if someone else is just like, nah, I think it's racist or sexist, you'd be like, yep, I get that.
Get that
I'm
too.
not, to be clear, I'm not arguing. I am, just to be super fucking clear. Yeah, no, that's cool. I understand you don't want to come to the production. That's fine. Totally get it. We're trying to do something, but I'm not talking you into it. That is not my goal here.
I'm going to be doing a one-man show of Merchant of Venice, and but you're not Jewish. I know.
But I thought if I really leaned into various voices, I think this is a bad idea. No, I think
I'm coming from a oft unheard voice in this country, white, straight, Christian male. They don't get enough voice.
yeah, this podcast should be like, no, really, this waspy writer's fine. He he played it all 500 years ahead. Just don't take this from us. God damn it.
What are you going to take Shakespeare now?
Oh, I can't do anything. Oh, so Caliban's out? Caliban's out.
Oh, we
Great.
can't do
Caliban's
Caliban?
canceled. Caliban's canceled. Shylock's canceled. Fine. Fucking great. What's next?
That's another one. Wait till we get to Caliban. Jesus.
And Caliban's last. It's just like, at least we'll have the entire roadmap be that. And
Yeah.
We'll have like pretty firm takes on just like, nope, fuck it. Let's stop going to bat for this guy.
Yeah, no, because like it's funny because like what you just said made me think like how it ends for a character is super important. It really is.
Yeah.
And that it almost doesn't matter if you were on the side of this person.
Yeah.
If it ends badly for them, like the message is almost invariably that was the person who was wrong.
Right.
You know?
That's what they dramatically deserved is what it
Right.
Here's the message. And I don't remember, is Caliban, is it end poorly for him?
He's basically ridiculed and like he's basically made fun of. Like Prospero does this like magic trick and chases him through the woods with bees or something with the two clowns. Like basically he's a clown character along with the two other clown characters in the play. So right away, that doesn't bode well. That this racially charged character is a fool in the play, and then he's basically just ridiculed. And I think asked to give back all the clothes he stole or something like that. Oh, plus he's hungover, so he's naturally being punished for his misdeeds because he drank so much wine that he's hungover. So like he's basically a laughing stock at the end, you know.
I don't want to put out a spoiler, but fuck Prospero.
Yeah, I mean it really is like the message, like when you think about the Caliban character, the message of forgiveness in that play becomes a little hard to swallow. You know, it's like you really kind of go, really? Because this poor kid who you raised as a slave. Well, no, that's another thing. Oh, and we'll get to that in that play. But like there's like a stereotypical sin that Caliban did that is the reason why Prospero treats him the way he does.
It'll also be interesting to see if there's ever like the dad creates the stupid MacGuffin in this play. If there's ever a dad who is just like, oh, that dad sucks, or if every Shakespeare play, like the paterfamilias is always just like, oh, well, he's Gandalf, he's wise, then everything must flow out of that. And I could see that not being like, I'd feel like, I don't know, I can't think of any place where if you're a dad, then like if you're Lear, then like you can be an asshole for an act or two, but you'll come to your senses by the end. And if you're in this play an insane dad who sets up a weird puzzle, like a horror movie villain or something for your daughter to decide if she's married,
Lemerson's box. Yeah, Pinhead is going to come out.
I think that would
tear your soul apart.
There's nothing in the stage direction that says Pinhead doesn't come out. And,
no, it's true.
Take these princes and put chains on their skin and put them apart.
Just reading between the lines.
My dad had this weird box, and yeah, I said send them home, but Narissa knows they were torn apart by chains.
We're going to a place where pain is pleasure. Yay!
I think that would hit the right note, and then we would get that Shylock is like, I'm just trying to get through, okay? People are in a death cult.
That would be a hell of a play where Shylock
What-
is just like, whoa, these people.
Whatever your stereotypes of my culture, I don't think you think that I have any caskets that if you choose the wrong one, open up dimensions where people come out and tear people's flesh off. But these guys are into it, and that's how they choose spouses. So
weigh that against the fact that I charge interest. Which one's worse?
listen, pound of flesh does not actually seem that bad when you compare the fact that like she ripped the skin off 5 different princesses and was racist to one of them before having their skin ripped off. So yeah, what if Nerissa just like had pins coming out of her head?
Oh man,
or she was that one that just like chatters its teeth. Lots of stage direction options that rarely can use, what I'm saying.
The all leather production of Merchant of Venice.
For every Shakespeare thing, that should be a section. What if this was all leather? Just leather daddies. Do daddies ever do any wrong in Shakespeare? And do leather daddies ever do anything wrong?
I think we should do a whole episode where we do horror versions of the plays that we've read so far, because I'm thinking of like Taming of the Shrew.
Yeah,
could definitely be Texas Chainsaw. Like when he takes her back to the house.
Oh yeah.
You know, and all those like weird dudes are just kind of there.
Like whatever he's giving her food, like you could make that food anything you want. Just like,
yeah.
No, eat the mustard.
Yeah.
Eat the mustard.
Fucking bird skeletons hanging all over the place. Like that's what we need. That's what we need to do is go back and horrorize these things.
Our most important work is in genre, and we mostly flex into horror and porn, but we can look for others.
That'll be
all comedies, and just the parenthetical is just like horror, porn.
that'll be on the little podcast blurb on Apple. They mostly flex into horror and porn.
And pro wrestling. And Caddyshack. That's it basically.
They assure you that it's still about Shakespeare. But only
Seems like two guys
gently so.
trying to talk about horror and porn, and it's kind of uncomfortable.
What we did was we set out to do a horror and porn podcast, but there were too many out there, so we just called it Shakespeare. It's under the veil of Shakespeare.
And then they talked about Hellraiser for 3 hours. They think it's a great movie.
Our favorite horror movies are classics like The Shining, A Nightmare on Elm Street, or CNN. We wouldn't want to run into Wolf Blitzer in a dark alley. Anderson Cooper, on the other hand. Woof! That's woof, not wolf. Easy, Blitzer. Fat and Greasy Citizens is brought to you by the players Chuck and Gabe. Theme song, A Robust Crew by Darren Curtis. Next week, the second installment of The Merchant of Venice. And for us, a penchant for violence. We'll cut you, bitch. Enjoy.